do they even exist, introverted leaders? Because at that point I thought, it's not that logical, because a lot of people don't link introversion and leadership. So do they exist? So I started to look for them, and I found quite a lot of them. Because yes, they do exist, and they're quite successful. So there was really the starting point. And then I started to speak to all of those great leaders all around the world. I heard about their experiences, the strengths that they use, the challenges that they're facing. And I found that so inspiring.
Hello, and welcome to episode 83 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave a review, tell a friend, help get the word out there. Karolien Koolhof is a coach, trainer, and author of the book, Introverted Leadership. The book is about what introversion is, what cultural views exist around good leadership, and what prejudices introverted leaders have to deal with. Based on interviews with introverted leaders from all over the world, she describes the power of introverted leadership. Karolien has her own practice as a coach, in which she helps introverts to better deal with their daily challenges, including leadership and managing people and teams. She also provides training and team coaching in the field of personality. All right. Well, very excited to have my guest, Karolien. Welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So today we're going to get into the coaching and the training and the book that you wrote. But before we do that, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey through discovering that you were an introvert and how you embraced that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Karolien. I live in the south of the Netherlands. I'm 36 years old. I was born and raised in the Netherlands in the south as well. And already as a kid, I somehow knew that there was something out there, because teachers used to say to my parents, like, yeah, she could be a bit more out there, like be more outspoken. They even wrote in the report at some point, like, if she goes to like the next school after this one, make sure that she isn't overwhelmed by everything, because that might happen there. That they really thought that I was some kind of fragile human being because I was quiet. And at some point, they even linked it to intelligence. They said, like, yeah, maybe you should aim for a level a bit lower because of that overwhelm. But, well, then I started there, like at the intermediate level. And within 2 weeks, I worked my way up to like the highest level because, well, let's face it, introversion has nothing to do with intelligence, right? But that is something that really early on, made an impression, a lasting one, I would say. I started my career in journalism. I also studied languages and journalism. The journalism world is quite extroverted as well. And there too, whenever I had a meeting, like the yearly talks that you have with your manager about how you're doing, she used to say to me, like, yeah, you need to be more out there. You need to be more outspoken. So I felt like, oh no, there we go again. This is like a pattern that is like following me throughout my life. And maybe if it's several people, they might be right that there is something indeed that I need to work on. So what is it that is wrong then with me? So really at that point, I started to see it as something that I needed to work on. So I did that. I made like a heavy choice to do an extensive MBA program in order to do that, because I wanted to be a media leader. So I did sessions in Berlin, in the US, in Asia, learned a lot about leadership, but also about myself and my introverted side even more. And that is actually the turning point where I started to see it as a strength instead of something that needs to be fixed. Like I used to look at it for that. So that really has been a turning point for me, and also the starting point of my own company, to help other introverts see it as a strength instead of something that is hindering you or something that you should get rid of. Yeah, so that's the story in short.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of strengths that come from introversion. It's sad that anybody might think that it's less intelligence, because I mean, it's definitely not about that. There's some very intelligent introverts out there. What was the catalyst for that turning point? Like, how did you connect with the term introvert, and how did you realize this is something that I can embrace? This is something that's good. This is something that's good about me. What was the turning point? What instigated that?
I think that the first thing that led me to think about it more and to read about it more was a personality test that we did during the MBA program, where I came out as introverted. And then I had some fellow introverts in the program, and one of them, who was from England, he gave me the advice to read Susan Cain's book, Quiet. So I did that and thought, hey, that's interesting. That's just really a book about me. And that also like emphasizes the strengths of introversion instead of seeing it as a limitation. So I think there are several steps. There's first the realization, like, hey, I'm an introvert. And then after that, reading a lot about it. And yeah, like forming my own opinion, seeing it as a strength, and then, yeah, accepting it as a part of myself.
Yeah, definitely. And that was part of my journey too, taking a personality assessment. A lot more to it than that. You mentioned Susan Cain's book, Quiet. That's been mentioned by many, many of my guests, and definitely is a great book that I highly recommend.
Yeah, it's an eye-opener, really.
So, what would you say are some of your strengths? Sometimes I say superpowers as an introvert, or maybe some other ones that you've seen, in interviews that you've done for your book or clients that you've worked with.
Well, when it comes to me, I'm quite calm usually. I also do presentations, I teach, and I always hear from other people that I stay very calm, and that inspires them to also be calm and relaxed. So that is like the atmosphere that I bring if I'm somewhere. I don't take up a lot of space. I love to give other people space. So that helps me to listen really well, which is very useful as a journalist, but also as a coach. I'm doing right now. Really listening to people, trying to see like connections, analyzing things, really not looking at things from one perspective, but looking for several, and then like seeing which one is the best one. So I need a little bit of time to do that. But if you give me time to do that, I will come up with like a solution that you have not thought of, because I can go very deep and look for a lot of information and analyze that, and then helicopter above it to find like a pattern which is useful to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a strength that we do have as introverts is that deep thinking, but often we need some time. And that's something that if you don't realize, you're not able to fully use your gift, or let other people know, hey, you know what, give me a little bit of time to think about that. And it'll be well thought through, I promise.
Yeah, we used to have meetings at the newspaper where I used to work. And I always had a train ride between Breda and Rotterdam, where the newspaper is. And I used that 30-minute train ride to go through Twitter, to go through all of the news websites to see like, okay, what is happening today? Can I find different angles? Maybe something that hasn't been covered yet. So I really used that time to prepare. And then I came prepared to the meeting, and I had already like 3 or 4 ideas for stories that I could then share with the other people. Because if I would do that unprepared and they would ask me on the spot, like, okay, what are you going to cover today? It would be like, I don't know. Give me some time for that. So I always worked around that by really preparing very well. So I'm also very prepared as a person, usually. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great need that we have. And that's something that we need to understand because, that's not something I've always understood for myself. But if you can prepare before that meeting and know what the meeting's about or what you want to contribute, what questions you have, that is all part of our success.
Yeah, preparation is key for everything, for meetings, for presentations, for job interviews, all of that. Also, all of my coachees, I always advise them, like, write it down, what you want to say, and then, yeah, come prepared. And then maybe if you go for a job interview, think of some questions that are unexpected, for example. Yeah, that really helps to come across like as someone who is capable of doing that.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes even with the best preparation, we still may need to ask for some time to think. But often with the preparation, we've already done the thinking. And that's so valuable. And that's something I realized is, you might be working with an extroverted friend or colleague, and they might not need the same thing. And that's fine. They have different needs and you can't compare yourself. You just have to think, okay, what do I need to do? How am I going to be my best? And yeah, you took advantage of your train ride. And that's what we need to do is figure out how do we have that space to prepare for whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah, you need to be wary of that, of not like projecting your own behavior onto others, because, well, extroverts might do that, but we introverts, we do that too, because we say, hey, the extrovert, they go too fast. They don't think enough about things, but they just do it in a different way. So it's really about understanding the difference in behavior and then seeing how you can work together to get the best result out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So on this show, on the Quiet and Strong podcast, we talk about the strengths and needs of introverts. We do some strategies for success, but we also do some myth busting. So what's a myth or two that you want to bust today on the show?
I think the main one, I think the main one is that introverts aren't shy. A lot of people think that shyness and introversion are the same thing, but they're not. If you look at the Big Five personality test, it distinguishes between extroversion, which is a skill. So if you're introverted, you're on the list, and also emotional stability. And shyness is actually part of emotional stability. So it's a different part of personality. So what does that mean? Well, that means that you can be shy if you're introverted, but also if you're extroverted. Just think about that for a couple of seconds. Like, what does that mean for an extrovert who is shy? Well, that's a person who wants to be in contact with a lot of people, but who might be too shy to actually do that. So I think that's a whole different struggle.
Yeah, I've said before that I think it might be harder for extroverts to be shy. So, was there a time?
That's a big one. Yeah.
Was there a time when you felt more shy, and did you overcome that?
Well, I think I was only shy as a small kid. After that, I was not really shy. I was always very daring. I like to try new things, to do things out of my comfort zone. When I was 16, I took a flight on my own just because I wanted to do that. I switched like jobs several times. I just like trying out new things. I did improv theater where you really have to like react on the spot. And I really discovered there that I do have some kind of gift where I can improvise and use my lighter side where I'm not overthinking everything. So that was also an interesting realization that there's also like this spontaneous part that I can use without all of the thinking.
Yeah, so I got to know, how do you do that? Because the improv could be a struggle for many introverts, because we were just talking about how we need to prepare. So how do you do improv as an introvert when you don't have the preparation?
Well, the good thing about introverts is that they have a good sense of their environment. They feel like what other people need, and they can adapt to that very easily. So with acting, it's all about listening really well what the other person is saying and then seeing what he or she is doing and then responding to that really on the spot. So it's all about intuition, really following that, not overthinking it, because as introverts, we might, well, be in our heads a little bit too much to overthink everything. So in order to overcome that, you really need to use your feeling side. Just stop using your head for just a little while and just your gut feeling like, okay, what am I going to do? Because in improv, there's no good or bad. There's just doing something. The only thing that's not good is not doing something. So yeah, that makes it easier to just do whatever.
Is that what helps us, just not judging things as good or bad? I think
Definitely, yes. And it also helps me in my presentations now, because a couple of years ago, I used to over prepare presentations because I wanted to be in control and I wanted to do it like in a perfect way. But given the fact that I've done improv theater, that really helps me to see that even if I let go a little bit, things are all right. So I also do that when I'm doing a presentation now. Half of it is presentation, but the other half is looking at the room, looking at the people in the room to see what's happening there. If they understand everything, if there's maybe, like a side conversation that you can include in the workshop you're doing. So I think that's an important part as well, to be sensitive and use that intuition that you also have as an introvert.
Absolutely. And introverts does not equal shyness, like you were talking about. I happen to think that some people can overcome shyness just by understanding their introversion, by understanding what's going on, that they're deep thinkers, they think before they speak and all that. That was the case for me, because I definitely was shy as I was younger, like yourself, but it was overcome by just understanding who I was and the strengths that introversion brings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shyness is often linked to shame. So it's about feeling ashamed when you're faced with other people in a certain situation. So, for example, if you did like a presentation at school when you were younger and it didn't go as you wanted, well, then that might be something that you wanted to avoid from that point. So that can make you shy. So shyness is not inborn as introversion actually is for the larger part. So indeed, shyness can be overcome, whereas introversion, well, it's really imprinted in your brain. So that is not something you can overcome. You can, well, learn to use the strengths of it and to deal with the challenges of it, but you cannot change it.
Yeah, we're deep thinkers, and that's a good thing. We're deep feelers, and it's not going to change, but we sure can embrace it.
Yeah, sure.
So you wrote the book. I'm going to read the whole title here: Introverted Leadership: Thriving as a Quiet Leader. When did you decide to write that?
That was actually the theme of my thesis for the MBA that I did in Berlin. And yeah, at the end of the personal journey that I made during this MBA. So the question that I had thinking about all of that was like, hey, so my idea was to be a leader. I now know that I'm an introvert. So how do other introverts do that? Do they even exist, introverted leaders? Because at that point I thought, it's not that logical, because a lot of people don't link introversion and leadership. So do they exist? So I started to look for them, and I found quite a lot of them. Because yes, they do exist, and they are quite successful. So that was really the starting point. And then I started to speak to all of those great leaders all around the world. I heard about their experiences, the strengths that they use, the challenges that they're facing. And I found that so inspiring. Given my journalistic background, I thought, yeah, if I just write a thesis about this, it's going to land in some drawer like my other thesis that I wrote before. And that would be a shame. So I just contacted a publisher in the Netherlands first. Really, yeah, I was doubting, like, is that even something that people are going to read? Because it's such a niche subject, right? But they were enthusiastic straight away. So yeah, we made a plan, and 9 months later, the book was ready. Like at the same point when I finished my thesis, I did that at the same time, writing the thesis, writing the book, and it's already in its third edition in Dutch. And after the first edition came out, I decided to translate it into English as well, because I think that the message of it, which is that, well, introverted leadership is very powerful. I think that's such a strong message that I wanted to share with practically the whole world. So that's why I also translated it into English. And yeah, here we are. It's there.
All right. Yeah, and that's another myth that, people try to say that introverts can't be good leaders or great leaders. And the truth is, we both know introverts can be amazing leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And you interviewed, so how many people did you interview for this book?
12 in the Netherlands and Belgium, and then another 12 like worldwide. Yeah, some of them they overlap, so I took some of the leaders from Netherlands and Belgium for the English version. So I think in total was 20 people. And yeah, it was great to see that it was not that hard to find them. For some of them, it was really gut feeling. I had the feeling that person might be introverted. Then some other, I got them through connections that I have. And I had all of them do a personality test up front, because I wanted to be sure that they actually are introverts. And yeah, they all turned out to be introverts.
So as you were interviewing, was there a lot of confirmation of things that you already felt like you had learned about introverts and leadership, or was there some big takeaways that you learned?
Well, I think for half of them, I found out that they were still struggling with the fact that they are introverted in some way or another. Yeah, some of them really felt that they could not share that with the rest of the world, because otherwise people would think that they are not suitable leaders, for example. I really had some people doubt about it or even change their names. Some of the names have been changed in the book because they did not want to be there with their own names. So just to give you an idea of how bad that still is for some people to really embrace the fact that they are introverted. I think that was the biggest eye-opener for me. That is still such a struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah, we still have a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's too bad, because as we know, there's some great strengths, and that's very interesting that some people are still, I don't know if ashamed is the right word, but that they're still afraid of who they are and being themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So you interviewed people from all over, and you yourself, we were just talking, and you speak 7 different languages. That's very impressive. What cultural differences did you find in introverted leaderships in different regions and different countries?
Well, there's 2 aspects when it comes to culture. There's culture between countries, obviously, continents, if you wish. And what I found is that some continents are more introverted. That's Asia and Africa. And others are more extroverted. That's mainly Northern America and Western Europe. And the other countries are a little bit in the middle, not that outspoken. So that is one. And that has to do with what we call Hofstede dimensions. Hofstede is a means of seeing differences between cultures. There are different aspects to it. For example, individualism or collectivism, where research links collectivism to introversion. So that's an interesting finding as well, right? That we introverts, we think about the group, about we. Whereas individualism is linked to extroversion. So it's more about personal success, personal gain. So if you look at it that way, yeah, well, in America, for example, personal success and showing that's acceptable, right? It's even like the American dream, like, hey, see what I have achieved. It's very important. Whereas if you look at, for example, China, Asian country, well, it's all about the group, about what do you contribute to the group as a whole. I learned going to China for my MBA program that Chinese people, they use their phone all day. You see all of them on their phones like everywhere right now. Okay, but it's that important for them because it is part of who they are as a person. It's their identity, like how they fit into the group, the bigger group. That's what they work on like all day long. It's not just personally, but it's like the group aspect of it. Just to give you an example of that. So that's the like the country part. And then there's a smaller part, which is like the company culture, right?
Right.
Because, well, what's a company culture? Well, the first people who start a company, they create the culture. And there you see that personality plays a big role. Because imagine that a bunch of more extroverted people start a company. Then we see what we call affinity bias happening, which means that as human beings, we prefer to surround ourselves with people who are just like us. So then if you have a more extroverted group of people, if they look for a new person to fill a new role, they will probably look for someone like them, so a more extroverted person. So for introverts, then it's really hard to like become part of that group because they are seen as different, hence not suitable for that role. There are several cultures, for example, sales, consultancy, like the really outgoing ones, which tend to be more extroverted because it's also more about the individualism and everything. But there's others like education, healthcare, the ones that emphasize the group aspect, people that are more introverted. So there too, you see big differences between company cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. And, before we hit record, I also just asked you, I hadn't thought about this because, where I am in the US, it's definitely more of the extroverted, but in a more introverted place, is it the extroverts that might feel uncomfortable or out of place?
Yeah, definitely, because, well, the way the place is creates the expectations, right? So for more extroverted people, that means that they need to adapt more in Asia or Africa. For the book, I also spoke to a Dutch person who travels around the world doing sessions, and he told me that in Japan, he felt like an extrovert, whereas in the US, he felt like an introvert, and he's somewhere in the middle in the Netherlands because it's not that outspoken here. But just to give you an idea, and we also tend to think that people from Asia are very introverted, right, when we meet them. But in fact, that's not at all the case. It's just the way they learn to behave.
Right. That's very, very fascinating. So what would you say makes a great leader?
I think one of the most important things is authenticity, to really be yourself, know your strengths, know your challenges, and be honest about that. Be vulnerable as well, show that you're a human. That's a big one. Can be tricky for introverted leaders if they're in like a culture where it's harder to be accepted as an introvert. So I think that really is a challenging one. And then there's research, because I ask myself this question as well, like, is extroversion actually an aspect of great leadership? Well, research does not show that. The most important aspect is altruism, caring about other people. That's really the most important one for leadership effectiveness. Extroversion is only a factor for leadership emergence, so being seen as a leader. So people tend to see extroverts as suitable leaders, whereas if you look at effectiveness, well, that's not at all the case. And caring about other people is the most important one.
Okay, we probably busted some more myths right there too.
Yes, I hope so.
We've been talking about strengths, but specifically as we're talking about introverts, what are some strengths that they bring into leadership that might look different than extroverts?
Well, their style is usually like a leading from behind one. So it's not that they dominate the place, but they prefer to listen to their people, to give a lot of space, give a lot of autonomy. So for autonomous teams, it can be very useful to have an introverted leader because introverts naturally don't need to take up a lot of space as a leader. So they can be helpful there. Then I think they're very strong when it comes to long-term strategy because they love to go deep. They love to think of different scenarios, look from different perspectives, take a helicopter view, so that can really help to develop a long-term strategy. That's another one, I would say.
Absolutely.
And then the personal aspect, they're very strong one-on-one usually. So, for example, now with times where people are working from home more often, they can check in with their people, talk one-on-one, like what's going on. They're the ones who sometimes even remember about the dog that colleague has and what is going on out there. Yeah, it's really about quality instead of quantity, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to remember. We've talked about a lot of myths today, but introverts, we value connection. It's just we probably thrive in the one-on-one or small group more than the larger group. Not that we can't thrive there too, but when it comes to our preferences and our gifts, the one-on-one or smaller group can definitely be our place.
Yeah. It's also because of the preference of going deep, which is easier with one person than with a whole group, right?
Yeah, definitely. So communication differs between introverts and extroverts. Introverts tend to think and then speak, while extroverts speak in order to think. How's that important to understand as an introverted leader? You might be leading introverts, you might be leading extroverts. How's that important to understand the different communication styles?
Yeah, just to go back to the meeting that I spoke about before, it's very important to know that some people need preparation up front, so that you need to send them an agenda. Maybe you even need to go to them and ask, like, hey, we're going to cover this and that. Is there something you would like to share? Then write that down. And then when time comes, just ask them, like, okay, you told me that you wanted to share something. So now's the time. So then they already had time to think about it and they can actually share something. So that's one. And then, for the extroverts, I would say, well, they speak and they think. And sometimes that can make it hard for introverts to interfere because they feel that they need to wait until a person is done speaking. So it's really to make both of them conscious of the fact that, hey, you can interrupt extroverts. They don't mind at all because it might even help their thinking. And for extroverts to be mindful of the fact that, hey, there are people who are not speaking, but they might have something to say. So also there, give them some space now and then.
Yeah, it's just so important to be aware of all the different personalities of those that you're leading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's just introversion, extroversion, right? There's other aspects to it as well, like if you're open to change or not, if you're very organized or not. So there's just so much to think about. If you're leading people, it's really,
Yes,
very
true.
interesting field.
Very true. Introversion, extroversion, that's part of it, but there's so many other gifts. It's important to get to know our personalities, but also the personalities of others. You know, what are my strengths? What are the strengths of those on my team?
Yeah, and how can you make it work? How can you use all of the strengths out there? And I think, yeah, when it comes to diversity and inclusion that we are talking about a lot right now at the moment, right? It's very important to overcome this affinity bias because it brings you so much to have like a diverse team with different ideas, can help you solve problems way easier and faster because there's different people, might even help you in hiring because, well, the current market, well, it's quite tricky, right? Finding new people. So I think that can be really something that can help move all of that forward, to be mindful of that.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting point. As we're having conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, how do you see our personality styles fitting into that?
Well, I think the ideal situation would be to check in with everyone, to try and understand all of your people, see what they need, see what their unique assets are that you can use. And then based on that, yeah, just divide all of the tasks out there. That's, I think, a better way of talent management. It's really not doing it the other way around and saying like, okay, there's this job that needs to be done and you just do that. No, just start from the people and see like, okay, what do we have? What can they do? And is there maybe a certain personality type missing that we can include into the team in order to have like the perfect team there? And I think the same goes for leadership because I don't believe in either or. I believe in together as well. I think you can very well have an introverted leader work together with an extroverted one because they are complementary. Because, well, the extroverted leader is like a charismatic one often. They love talking to people all day long. You can have them do that. They can, do presentations like all day long. It doesn't take that much energy for them. And you can have the introverted leader look at the long-term strategy, do the one-on-one talking to people. That kind of combination, I think, is very valuable for companies as well.
Yeah, as we're looking at different strengths, it's so important to partner. You know, it's like, all right, what am I bringing? Maybe what am I missing? What is somebody else really good at? And we can work together, like you're saying.
Yeah. In my coaching, I also spend a lot of time on trying to understand what we can learn from other people who might annoy us, because there's always like a quality behind that. For example, as introverts, we hate dominant people, right? But we can learn from them to take up a little bit more space and share our ideas as well, because they're valuable. I think it's also a very interesting one to look at it that way and not to be annoyed by other people, but just see it as a quality that they have that might be different from ours.
So you said in your interviews there were some people that probably hadn't embraced introversion in their leadership. You're a coach and you're a trainer. How do you help introverted leaders gain confidence in leadership using their introversion?
Mm-hmm. Well, I always work towards a shift in their thinking, because oftentimes they tend to only see the challenges and the disadvantages of it. Like, hey, I'm very bad at sharing my opinion, or I'm very bad at being in front of big groups. But what they forget is to look at the things they're very good at. So we always start with that. Like, what are your strengths? We do a personality test. Sometimes I do something about talent and motivation. Like, where do you get your energy from? I have them talk to people who know them very well, to ask, like, okay, where do you see my strengths, my natural talents? Because we tend to not see them because it's so natural to us. We think like, hey, everyone can do that, right? Is that even a talent? So in several ways, we gather all of the talents, and then I have them write like a self-portrait about them. That is already like a big confidence boost usually. And then the last thing I always work on is limiting beliefs, because, well, you might know all of your strengths, but what are you telling yourself? Especially introverts, they are in their heads quite a lot. So then it's interesting to see, like, what are you telling yourself? Can you allow yourself to show those strengths? Or are you telling yourself, like, hey, it's not okay to take up a lot of space, so I should not do that? So if that's the case, well, we might need to change that thinking into, hey, I deserve a little bit of space because I have valuable ideas. So that's another thing that I work on with my coachees.
Yeah, that sounds great. And yeah, the first point you were making, too often we think everybody is the same, but that's why these kinds of conversations are so important, because there's so many different gifts and we need to understand ours, and then and not limit ourselves by comparing ourselves to others, but what are we bringing and what gets us excited about what we're doing, because it's not going to be the same. You mentioned strategy, and that's one of my gifts as an introvert. I love that. Not everybody's great at it, but there's also people that are better at things that I'm not as good at. But I love when I'm able to strategize about making new business plans, or making new plans for whatever's going on in my life, and I love that, and I'm good at it. But there's plenty of things that some other people are better at than me.
Yeah. And it's always, you can never be good at everything, right? You just need to know where your strengths lie, and then use that to your advantage. That's, I think, the most important thing there.
So an important part of being an introvert is having some time alone. Again, most people don't want to spend all their time alone, but what are some strategies to get that time alone? What have you done or seen other people do?
I think an important one is to also plan it, because that's also a problem. If you prefer to give other people space, then what might happen is that your agenda gets fully booked by appointments, so that you don't have any downtime at all. So, for example, me personally, I always block like an hour for a lunch break, so that I also have the time to like make a short walk here, those kind of things. So really plan me time. And it even goes as far as that I took a vacation on my own a couple of months ago, because I just felt the need to unwind. I just did that. I went to a spa hotel in the north of Italy, and it was lovely. I'm the kind of person who's like, okay, I don't mind what other people are thinking about it. I just feel like I want to do this, so I'm doing it. And then if you convey that kind of message, then people respond to it also in that way. Like, hey, that's really great that you're doing that. And now I get that from other young mothers, because my son's only 15 months old. Like, hey, that's actually a great idea. I should do that too. So it's just that one person has to start it, and then others will follow. And I'm not afraid to take on that responsibility.
How long was your solo vacation?
That was 1 week.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've never done that. That sounds amazing.
I can recommend it. It's perfect, really, to have some time to process all of your thoughts. Just to do what you want, and even maybe don't do anything at all, because I also did that. Yeah, I can definitely recommend it.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then the other point you were making, it is about our calendar. Definitely making some time to recharge, but also making some time to plan, to think, to have some dreams. Our calendars are very important places to set aside time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my most creative ideas came during COVID times, when I was at home all the time, working here. I became very creative. I created like a whole e-learning, all of that. Part of the book was written in that period too. So yeah, I think alone time is really key.
Because you had some time to think, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the space and the time to do that.
Yeah. So we got to carve that out. That's really important. And it's even if somebody else, that we're working with doesn't need that time, it doesn't mean that we don't.
True. Very true. Yes.
Okay. Wow. We've talked about a lot of things. Is there anything that you want to bring out that we haven't hit on yet?
Well, I would just say, and that's what I always say is the main message of everything that I'm doing, is that introversion is really a superpower, and as an introvert, just be proud of that and share it so that other introverts can embrace it as well. Because, well, at least 1/3 of the population, the world population, is introverted. But a lot of introverts still feel that they're out there all alone. So I think it's really time to start sharing it a little bit more so that other introverts feel that they can be their authentic selves as well. It's really a movement that we gotta get moving a little bit more. It has started, but there's still, I think, some space for it to grow.
Yeah. So many people that I talk to either still don't understand, or when they do, they went through a long period of feeling like something was wrong. And that's something that we are working hard to stop, to help people embrace. I love, how you put it, their superpowers, their gifts, and of course, with the theme of your book, introverts can be amazing leaders, but they're going to do it in their introverted way. They're not going to do it acting like something that they're not.
No, authenticity is key indeed. And yeah, be proud of that too.
You're doing some amazing work, with introversion, with introverted leadership. Where can people find out more?
On my website, quietquality.org. And well, the book is available on Amazon if people feel like reading it after this podcast.
Thanks so much, Karolien, for being on the show today. It was so great to speak with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the website quietandstrong.com. It includes blog posts, links to social media channels, and send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. If you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there is now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including your 4-letter Myers-Briggs code. You can also purchase the full report if you'd like more details. I'll add a link to the show notes. There's so many great things about being an introvert, and so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.